Steve Jobs killed it personally in 1998, but the chip Apple built to run it is now inside the phone in your pocket. Every single smartphone on Earth runs on the corpse of Apple's worst failure. The product was the Apple Newton. The chip was called ARM, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a handheld computer that lost Apple hundreds of millions of dollars ended up funding the most successful chip architecture in human history, including the one inside the iPhone Apple killed it to make. 1990, Apple is in trouble. The Mac is being outshipped by PCs. Sales are flat, and the CEO John Sculley, the guy who pushed Steve Jobs out in 1985, is convinced the future of computing is something he has personally named the personal digital assistant, a pocket computer, handwriting recognition, calendar, contacts, notes, messaging. Sculley wants Apple to ship it first. He pours hundreds of millions of dollars into a secret project codenamed Newton. There is one problem: no chip exists that can run a pocket computer. Intel's processors are too power-hungry. Motorola's chips are too slow for the touchscreen handwriting work. Sculley needs something nobody has built: low power, high efficiency, simple instruction set, cheap to manufacture. So Apple goes shopping. And in November 1990, Apple, the British computer maker Acorn, and the semiconductor firm VLSI quietly co-found a new company. Its name, Advanced Risk Machines Limited, ARM for short. ARM's only product is a chip architecture originally designed at Acorn by two engineers nobody knows, Sophie Wilson and Steve Ferber. Apple's only reason for founding ARM is to get that chip into the Newton. August 1993, the Newton message pad launches. It costs $700. It runs on an ARM 610 chip, Apple's specific commission from the company Apple co-founded. The chip is exceptional. It uses 1/10 the power of an Intel 486. It is small. It runs cool. The Newton itself, the product the chip was built for, is a disaster. The handwriting recognition does not work, or rather, it works the way Apple promised, about 30% of the time. The Doonesbury comic strip marks it for weeks. The Simpsons writes an episode in which Beat Up Martin is recognized as Eat Up Martha. Late-night hosts make Newton jokes for a year. Apple sells about 50 Newtons in the first 6 months. The product targets executives. Executives return them. The marketing budget burns through. Sculley spends an estimated $500 million on Newton across the program's life. Apple's stock craters. The board forces Sculley out in 1993. Apple tries to save it. Newton 2.0 ships in 1996 with completely rewritten handwriting recognition that actually works. Reviewers love it. Nobody cares. The brand is already a punchline. February 1998. Steve Jobs is back at Apple. He is 6 months into running the company. He is killing things to focus the company. The first major product he kills, publicly and personally, is the Newton division. 200 employees laid off. Project shut down. The Newton, Apple's most expensive failure to date, dies. But here is the part nobody noticed. Apple had been quietly selling its stake in ARM Holdings since 1993, when Apple was bleeding cash. By the late 90s, those ARM shares had become Apple's single most valuable financial asset, worth more than every Newton ever sold by an order of magnitude. Here is what was actually happening. The Newton failed as a product, but the chip Apple commissioned for it, the ARM architecture, turned out to be the right answer to a question nobody had finished asking yet. ARM was designed around one constraint: do as much computing as possible with as little electricity as possible. That priority was a luxury in 1990. By 2005, it was the only constraint that mattered. The first beneficiary was Nokia. Nokia licensed a ARM architecture for the chips in mobile phones starting in the late 1990s. By 2003, virtually every flip phone and feature phone in the world ran on an ARM-derived chip. Battery life that previously lasted hours now lasted days. Phones got smaller, calls got cheaper, the mobile market exploded. Then Apple came back to ARM from a very different angle. 2007, Steve Jobs unveils the iPhone. The chip inside the original iPhone is an ARM 11, manufactured by Samsung. The same architecture Apple had co-founded the company for 2 decades earlier. For the Newton, the product Jobs killed his first month back, is now the heart of the product he is using to redefine Apple. The iPhone sells over 1 billion units. Every Android phone that follows it, Samsung Galaxy, Google Pixel, Xiaomi, OnePlus, every Chinese brand, every brand in every country also runs on a ARM. By 2015, more than 95% of all smartphones shipped worldwide use ARM-based processors. Then the Mac comes back to a ARM2. In November 2020, Apple ships the M1 chip. It is the first Mac processor in 15 years not made by Intel. The architecture is a ARM. The chip Apple invented for a failed handheld in 1993 has, 27 years later, replaced Intel inside the Mac itself. The Newton failed, but every device Apple now sells runs on the architecture the Newton paid to invent. And here is the part that makes engineers laugh and economists cry. By 2024, ARM architecture chips were inside an estimated 270 billion devices on Earth. Phones, tablets, laptops, cars, smartwatches, wireless earbuds, smart speakers, routers, thermostats, game consoles, drones, satellites. Every iPhone, every iPad, every M-series Mac, every Android device, the Nintendo Switch, the Steam Deck, Tesla's infotainment system, Amazon's Kindle, SpaceX's Starlink terminals, pretty much every connected object built in the last 15 years. The combined revenue of devices running ARM chips in 2024 was somewhere north of $1 trillion. All of it traces directly to a chip Apple commissioned in 1990 to run a product Apple killed in 1998 that lost Apple $500 million on its way to becoming a comedy punchline. The Newton was so spectacularly wrong as a product that it gets used in business schools as the textbook example of a tech failure. But the bet underneath the Newton that the future of computing would be portable, battery-powered, and dominated by low-power chips turned out to be the single most correct prediction in the history of consumer technology. Apple was right about everything, just wrong about which decade. So the next time you pick up an iPhone, or open a MacBook, or charge an Apple Watch, remember that the silicon inside every one of those products exists because a man named John Sculley, who was famously wrong about almost everything, was right once about what kind of chip the future would need. The Newton was killed by the same CEO whose company now sells 2 billion devices running its chip. The Doonesbury jokes have been forgotten. The Eat Up Martha jokes have been forgotten. The $500 million lost has been forgotten. But the chip the failure paid to invent is now sitting in the pocket of nearly every adult human on Earth, running the most successful family of products in the history of consumer technology. Failure in tech is rarely about being wrong. Usually it is about being right too early. The Newton was right by about 15 years. Apple is still cashing the check. Next Sunday, the story of a forgotten engineer who, in 1985, invented the algorithm that quietly runs every Wi-Fi router, every Ethernet switch, and every network you have ever used in a single weekend with a poem attached. Subscribe to Obsolete Origins. I will see you Sunday.